So joining me in studio this morning is political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe. Joining me in studio, a very good morning to you, Mr. Sipho Seepe. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. A lot of mixed reactions from the general public and from the different opposition parties and some of the African National Congress members with regards to the entire cabinet reshuffle. Just talk us through your initial reaction with regards to this. Was this a good move from the president's side?
Well, the president had no choice. You need to understand, number one, there are three things that happened in the last 3 days. The first one was the matter of a court battle that involved Oak Bay. What emerged out of that engagement, especially by the judges, was that they gave an impression that he is a minister who seems to have a personal vendetta against a company. The minister was forced to, or told that the certificate, the financial intelligence certificate that he had brought had no bearing, and also that he was bringing a list of suspicious transactions, and the court does not deal with suspicions. And they could not understand why a minister would not have understood that. That's the first thing. And they also could not understand why a minister, after being given legal advice on the matter that don't bring this, it has no relevance, he continued regardless. So here's a minister who ignored even the legal advice that he was given on something that ultimately embarrassed him. So the whole notion of a minister almost being obsessed about a particular company because of its association, I don't think it did him well. The media tried to undermine that aspect. Then the second thing is the ongoing tensions that are reported in the media. But I think the matters came to head during the funeral of Ahmed Kathrada, where those who gathered there, and one could say probably mostly the anti-Zuma brigade, began to almost take a position, almost creating further divisions, and almost creating a hero out of the Minister of Finance. And when they do that, when you create a hero, you must also be saying somebody is a villain. But I think the last straw was when the SACP publicly dared the president to do his damnedest best. And what also emerged there was the breach of trust, that when the head of state spoke to the SACP, the assumption was that the discussions that were there would be treated with confidence that is expected when your sensitive information is given to you.
And would be retained within the meeting.
And what happened is that there you had SACP almost playing to the gallery and grandstanding. And of course, what it was left with is that if the president did not do anything, then he would have been treated as a really lame dark president who has been emasculated and unable to do anything. So effectively, he was forced into a corner. Even some people who felt that they could push the president for a compromise. And some people also said it appeared like it was a consideration. That consideration was actually thrown out by that grandstanding, that opportunistic behavior.
Without interrupting you, Prof. Sipho Seepe, with regards to the SACP and their stance, which we saw yesterday, laying it all bare, their discontentment with the president reshuffling of the cabinet, the removal of Pravin Gordhan, you know, the general public was expecting the president to be vindictive, in some sort of way remove some of, or most of the SACP ministers. What do you make of the president move?
Well, I think what the president did to provide is an opportunity. Remember, some of them had almost implied that should Pravin be removed, they are going to resign en masse. So what you are saying is that that is not my approach to things. The unity of the alliance is very important. And if you look at that, there was a retention of members of the SSCP in their position. People like Bladin Zamande was not removed. You have Twidas who was shifted to another portfolio. You have Patel kept, who comes from the unions. You also had Rob Davis. So you don't see a minister who is vindictive here. You actually have a president who is vindictive. You have a president who says, it doesn't matter what I think, but if people are making a contribution, it is better for me to retain them. So it will be really up to them to also see this as an olive branch. But also, sometimes the tensions are almost exaggerated. I think the ANC as a party is a party of difference. This is a party that is home to people holding strong views. And so from time to time, you'll have people expressing their unhappiness. But I think what often happens is that people put their organization first. People have also remarked, for instance, if you think about the Malusi Gigaba, this is a person who was known to be a strong supporter of Thabo Mbeki. But once democracy reigned in the ANC, he accepted the outcome of the democratic process, and in the process went to say the newly elected leadership will gain my support. And the president has rewarded that people who put their organization first rather than people who are members of other members.
Now, Prof. Seepe, earlier on this year at the State of the Nation address that President Jacob Zuma delivered, he made mention of radical economic transformation being the main agenda that the government wants to push forward in the coming years and immediately with urgency. Assessing the list and the involvement of younger people, is this a strategic move from the president's side, and how will the younger involvement of the younger generation into the minister portfolios assist in pushing forward economic transformation?
Well, number one, what the president has actually done is also to recognize that South Africa is a youthful country. And if you do not bring young people, then young people will not think that there's a place for them in politics. So that is one thing that he's responding to. But he also says they bring a lot of energy that you would expect from young people. But most importantly, what he was also trying to do is also to reward those who had actually stayed. I mean, there are new ministers who had been deputy ministers for a long time. If you take Professor Hlengwe Mkhize, she's been there for some time. You take somebody like Ayanda Jojo, who's now a minister of communications. She's been there a long time. But what it says that for those who don't think that they're entitled because of time in the organization to a ministerial position, what the president has actually done said, no, but your contribution or you're now ready to assume the position. And in doing so, the new people are also bringing their own constituencies to support him. I mean, there are three reasons why the president would reshuffle. One is to make sure that he rewards others politically, to make sure that you have people who are going to support you, who are going to be team players, not people who are going to be stabbing at the back. And then you also deal with making sure that you increase the efficiencies in government. And lastly, it's also an issue of loyalty. So the president does look at all those elements.
Now, looking at the different reactions coming from the different political parties, such as the Democratic Alliance, the United Democratic Movement, and the NFP, have actually come out admitting that they are completely not happy with the changes that the president has instituted in the entire cabinet. Now, what do you make of this? Was this expected reaction from these opposition parties? Was it expected? Yeah,
well, I mean, these parties, there's nothing right that the president can do. Just like there's nothing that the president can do that will be right to some other people in this country. So one must accept that. But ultimately, we are a country, a democratic country, and people have a right to express themselves in a particular way. But also, if people are unhappy and you have sufficient people who are unhappy, they also know that there is a way in which you can deal with these matters of unhappiness. People must go out there to vote. But what often happens is that you have small groupings that have enough loud hailers, and they create an impression that they have a lot of support. If you take, for instance, within the ANC, there have been a few people within the ANC who are given a lot of airtime, who present themselves as the voice of reason and the people who are supported. But these people are people who were defeated in fair electoral process of the ANC. And some of them have not come to terms with that political humiliation and defeat. But this president, as we stand, is a president who enjoys support from the MKVA, It's a president who enjoys support from the Youth League. It's a president who enjoys support from the Women's League. And you may have members of the ANC who will never support him. But if you look on the ground, you have also a number of provinces that support him. So those are the realities, and the politics is about numbers.
And I actually want us to look at the factionalism and the divisions which are currently occurring in the African National Congress as the party. Staying on the reactions, the ANC SG Kgadima has come out agreeing or saying that he's actually also not happy with the moves made by the president. What do you make of this? Is this the reflection of the ongoing factionalism occurring in the African National Congress? And perhaps how can the president move forward and deal with the ongoing factionalism in the party, as it might some sort of way hinder growth of the party as a whole?
Well, I think, first of all, for the Secretary General of the ANC to do that, it's really unwise politically. I think what he needs to do is to show a certain degree of political maturity to understand that there are times when certain decisions may not be in your favor. But also at the same time, what he does also express is that in the ANC, having difference of opinion is not a sin. Which is actually fine. And I think he must explain it also in those terms, that in the ANC we differ and we express our differences, but in the end, I, as a member of the African National Congress, I also understand that I have no powers. We give somebody powers because that is something that is in the Constitution. And the president has not acted unconstitutionally. And also the people have been talking about the markets. The markets have been complaining also about what appears to be political tensions. But now these very same markets want to dictate. So what you have here is a president who decided to assert his constitutional authority. And actually, people must come to terms with that.
Just before wrap up, touching on also the effects that the entire cabinet reshuffle will have on South Africa's economy, as you've made mention that some economists and the markets actually want to dictate as to what is going to happen with the markets, and a lot of predictions around the negativity around it. Do you think that in the future or near future, this could some sort of way position the president into making another decision of changing the finance minister, as we've seen with Nhlanhla in the past?
No, I don't think that is likely to be the case. Remember, the ANC has learned the hard way, and also the markets are very fickle. And it depends on what messages the new ministers are going to make, especially the Minister of Finance. I mean, if the Minister of Finance gives a sense that issues like fiscal discipline would be one of the key tasks that he must focus on, then I think the markets can easily be tamed. But what is most important is to assure the markets that this does not mean that spending money is going to be free for all. And of course, what we have in this country is also a narrative. I mean, I was reading some of the so-called analysts and writers saying what it means that there's going to be looting on a daily basis at the Treasury. But this is a narrative that we have become used to, that you no longer need evidence in this country. You just have to...
Mr. Sipho Seepe, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for sharing your professional opinion with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us this morning. Well, joining me in studio to unpack further details on the cabinet reshuffle is Mr. Tshepo Kgadima, who is the political analyst. Mr. Tshepo Kgadima, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Well, there has been a lot of mixed reactions with regards to the entire midnight cabinet reshuffle from President Jacob Zuma. Just talk us through your initial reaction with regards to the entire move. Are you in support of this move? Was this a move in the right direction for South Africa?
Yeah, look, as an analyst and an observer of matters political and economic, I can tell you this. The administration of President Jacob Zuma over the next 4 weeks is in for an exceedingly boisterous period. We have to bear in mind that the ministers who have been removed, they're still members of parliament. So that includes Minister Pravin Gordhan, Deputy Minister or former Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas, former Minister Derek Hanekom. All of them, they are still members of parliament. And if one is to follow through on the promise that was made by the South African Communist Party yesterday during their press briefing, that can only confirm that we are in for a boisterous period, because I would think that they had carefully thought through the statements that they made yesterday, and I can't see how they will not follow through on their promise, because they had categorically said that should Pravin Gordhan and Mcebisi Jonas be removed from office, they will therefore remove their own ministers who are members of the SACP from the government. So let's see if that happens. And I think the comments of the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Mr. Kgadima Ntashe, in my opinion, have only served to bring the ANC into disrepute, because the comments that he said, he made on Power FM last night, he made on Talk Radio 702 this morning, they can't help but destroy that theme of unity in action, because effectively he has said, listen, we as the ANC, and that stands to be tested, we have no faith in the changes that the president has made, but also made a more serious allegation of saying that the list that they were presented with as the officials was a list that was made somewhere else. First and foremost, the Constitution of the African National Congress, nor the Constitution of the Republic, that requires the president to have to go and consult and get consent from the office bearers or even the NEC before any decisions of this nature are made. So this can only tell us one thing, can point out that over the next 4 weeks, we are in really for an exceedingly difficult period. So the question is, will the president continue to be presidential? Will he continue in his capacity as the president of the ANC now, really bring about that decisive leadership that is now demonstrated that he can bring in his capacity as President of the Republic?
I actually, Mr. Kgadima, wanted to touch on the factionalism, which have been a major theme in the African National Congress currently, as we've seen. Let's first touch on the pre-argumentative statements which have been made by several members. As you've mentioned, SG Kgadima Ntashe, and also the SACP's stance, which we saw yesterday, actually throwing a huge backlash towards President Jacob Zuma and the entire cabinet reshuffle and the removal of Pravin Gordhan. What do you make of this? Does this actually say a lot about the president's character and quality of leadership with regard to him not being vindictive to those who have actually said certain statements towards him and the cabinet reshuffle?
Look, if there's one thing that President Jacob Zuma is guilty of, is consulting wildly. He's very guilty of that, and being exceedingly tolerant. And even where there are cases whereby certainly people are endangering the interest of the party, he gives them not a second chance, he gives them a 10th chance. And that is one thing that he's guilty of. So we should not be surprised, therefore, to see that it will appear that some of the leaders of the African National Congress, based on the leadership style of President Jacob Zuma, they have now mistaken that to mean that everything else is permissible, that the boundaries are no longer there. So the lack of boundaries invites disrespect. And in this case, it's the disrespect of the office of President of the Republic as so established by the Constitution of this Republic, with us being a constitutional democracy. So clearly, I think the ANC now, they need to take hold. The center needs to hold. And the person who can lead in that regard, it would be convention, even though the Constitution of the ANC does not vest as much power and authority as the Constitution of the Republic, but convention would dictate that the president of the ANC should actually have as much power and authority as the Constitution of the Republic. And President Zuma now needs to go and manage that, because we are seeing that the ANC caucus, we are waiting to see how they will respond today. Will they still be united? We know that there's been dissension in the ranks. Will those dissenting members of parliament, dissenting former cabinet ministers and existing cabinet ministers, will they now pledge their allegiance and their loyalty behind this president as so elected in terms of the Constitution of the Republic? That, without that, unfortunately, it would mean that the center cannot hold, and what the noises that we are seeing coming out of the Democratic Alliance, economic freedom fighters, will only be fueled by these factions within the ANC. So for the ANC, for the sake of the country, not just of the ANC, they now need to rally behind the president, and they need to ensure that they act in the best interest of this republic. And what is in the best interest of South Africa? Stability. To ensure that we can now correctly demand deliverance, to ensure that radical socio-economic transformation happens. And I think that's what the president, that's a vision of the president which must be supported.